Good evening. Don't mind me, I'm just celebrating my unbirthday. It is indeed a very merry unbirthday. And a birthday is a day that is not your birthday. It is indeed not my birthday today, so it is my unbirthday, so I give myself presents. Like a cup of tea. It's your unbirthday too? Well, I suppose that means I owe you a gift. Probably the gift that I've been promising for over a year now. The Alice's Adventures in Wonderland book review. Let's get weird. To start off with, I didn't want to compare the book to the movies, but you kind of have to. Before actually reading the Alice's Adventures in Wonderland book a couple of years ago, I think last year was when I finished it. My only other time with the source material, the actual book, was in the form of bedtime stories when I was very young, with my mother reading them to me, and my father, mostly my father, sometimes my sister. I was like four, 3 or 4, so I didn't remember much of it at all. But other than that, I had only watched the adaptions, the Disney adaptions, the Tim Burton adaptions. I think those are the only two adaptions I've seen. I want to watch more of them. But there are, instead of comparing, it's more contrasting. You can't really talk about the book without talking about the differences in the book and the adaptions, at least the mainstream ones, the two Disney ones, the live action and the animated one from, I believe it was the 60s, the early 60s, maybe late 50s. Um, both of which I adore, but they are very different from the source material. An example of that would be the Red Queen, the Queen of Hearts, and the Duchess are all three separate characters in the books, and there are two books, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. So the Red Queen and the Queen of Hearts and the Duchess are usually morphed into one character, I've seen in the movies, because they're all kind of similar. But the Red Queen is a good person. No, she's not a good person, never mind. She's against the White Queen. But the Duchess and the Queen of Hearts are. The Duchess is psychotic. She throws pots and pans, and she yells at a baby, and Alice has to take care of the baby because no one else is taking care of it, and the Duchess is throwing knives and pots, not at the baby, but they were near the baby and they could have hit the baby. So, of course, Alice takes the baby and tries to find somewhere safe for it, but along the way, it turns into a pig. There's no rhyme or reason for that, and we will get into why that is in a second. But first, I wanted to talk about the dark side of Wonderland. So, as you may or may not know, there is a dark side to Wonderland. There are a few theories as to what the author, I believe his name is Lewis Carroll. Yes, Lewis Carroll. I confuse him and C.S. Lewis sometimes just because of the name Lewis, but it's Lewis Carroll. There are a few theories as to if it has a deeper meaning than just a children's story. The first theory is that it's about mental health. A lot of adaptions put Alice in an asylum because they read her as being insane. Um, there are a number of. There's a theory that every character has its own mental illness. I believe Mad Hatter is bipolar, or the Queen is bipolar. I can't remember which one. I'm bipolar myself. A lot of the characters, if we're being honest, show a lot of signs of bipolar. I don't know any other signs of mental illnesses because I'm not an expert on them, but I am my own illness. Obviously, I would have to be to take care of it, but I could see where they're coming from that. But at the same time, it's just a chaotic story and it's weird, so they need chaotic characters. The next theory I'm not a fan of. It's about sexual exploration. Like the whole thing is a metaphor of Alice coming into puberty and realizing feeling sexual feelings and stuff, which I do not like, because in the story she's like 7 to 9, and that's way too young for anyone to be feeling anything sexual. So I completely exit that out. Nope, that's not valid whatsoever. And the next one I want to talk about, drugs. Obviously, drugs. C.S. Lewis, not C.S. Lewis, apologies, that is Narnia, a completely different fantasy land. C.S. Lewis is not the one I'm talking about. Lewis Carroll smoked a lot of opium for health reasons. It was just prescribed in Victorian ages, in the Victorian era, for a lot of health related reasons, including just pain. They also gave cocaine out for like anything, any fucking reason whatsoever. It was just handed out like candy. And they also, the Victorian medical system was all kinds of skewed because we didn't know anything, and it was all fueled by religious superstition. They would bleed people out because they thought they had demons in their blood. They would, or negative energy in their blood. They would masturbate women when they had their period. Doctors would literally play with a woman's genitals until orgasm in doctors' offices. Not cool. Not very weird, very predatory. But to cure them of basically PMS symptoms, very odd. It was a very sexist time. They basically thought that women were all lunatics because they ovulated by the cycle of the moon. That's what they thought. They ovulated by the cycle of the moon. That's not really connected, but they do have a time of the month where they go through, everyone knows this, but they thought they connected. They thought they were connected. So lunar, lunacy, loony. They had a whole mental illness that described just being a woman, basically. I forgot what it's called. I will put it down here. So, drugs. Obviously, there are references to drugs in the animated movie from Disney. I don't know if he did this on purpose, but there is, obviously, in the books as well. She eats mushrooms. We all know about psychedelic mushrooms. I have them on my shirt right now. It says, I think it says, have a good trip. No, it says, have a magical day for magical mushrooms. I've never done any I am losing my grain on reality right now. I have never used any psychedelic drugs before. I've only smoked marijuana. However, I'm interested in doing mushrooms. But that's neither here nor there. There's lots of drug references. I don't know if he intended them to be magical mushrooms in the book, because mushrooms did not come over from Asia until after the Victorian era. I did do my research on this. Mushrooms did not come over to America until after the Victorian era, and to the United Kingdom until after the Victorian era. So, because he was in the UK, not America. I don't know why I mentioned America. But they were not a thing. So I don't know, maybe he knew about it, like it was a inside thing that he knew about. I don't know, but I don't know if anyone knew about it. Honestly, I couldn't find any research about that. All I could see was that they did not come over from Asia until after the Victorian era. So I don't really think that drugs were, maybe the opium was, because the caterpillar does smoke a hookah. In the animated movie from way long ago, Alice takes a sip of tea and there's too much sugar in it, so there's like powder right here and it looks like cocaine. I don't know if that was done on purpose or not. Disney kind of used to put a lot of weird adult clips in their movies, which were usually sexual and altogether unnerving for a children's movie. But more so on the topic of drugs, Pink Floyd. There's a rumor that is true, I have proved it, that Pink Floyd's The Wall album, if you skip one song, and I think it's called Comfortably Numb, I think that's the one, it goes perfectly along with the animated Alice in Wonderland. This is true. I have done it. It's trippy as fuck. I was sober when I did it. The rumor is if you're high, it works. It works even if you're sober. And it's crazy and it's fucking cool. As you can tell, I love Alice in Wonderland, so I've done a lot of cool related Alice in Wonderland stuff with it. I have a white rabbit that I printed for this video. Isn't he cute? Cute little white rabbit. And 3D printed. By the way, we 3D print things for our shop. If you have any requests, go to prismaticdreams.com. But yeah, Pink Floyd and Alice in Wonderland, their album The Wall syncs up perfectly. Their album Dark Side of the Moon also syncs up with The Wizard of Oz, but that is neither here nor there. So, all in all, drugs have less to do than Alice in Wonderland originally, in my opinion, than it does now. Now it's obviously like a stoner's favorite thing to get high and watch. I understand that. It's part of like stoner culture. People do acid and watch it. People do mushrooms and watch it. That's cool. That's fine. But originally, that kind of taints the history of it because it was a children's story to begin with. In my opinion, it does kind of stain the culture a little bit. Speaking of which, one of my favorite bands from the 60s, Jefferson Airplane, the lead singer at the time, I forgot her name, Grace Slick, wrote White Rabbit, one of my favorite songs, about Alice in Wonderland, and when asked why, she said she doesn't understand why parents get upset when children grow up to do drugs when they read the books like Alice in Wonderland as a kid, which I kind of get what she's saying, but that also sounds like an edgelord thing to say when you're like 19 years old and don't really know anything, because as I said, I love Alice in Wonderland. I have my whole life, and the only thing I've ever done is weed so far. So like it really doesn't have anything to do with that, but whatever. Lastly, in the Dark Side of Wonderland segment, we're going to talk about the author's reputation. If you didn't know, a lot of people believe Lewis Carroll to be a child molester. This is because it has been proven that he was in possession of nude photos of young Alice Little, who the titular character of Alice was based on. Yes, that is disgusting. That is abhorrent. However, Victorian era, everyone in the Victorian era had nude pictures of children, and they did not look at them in a sexual way. They looked at it like art, like naked cherub baby angels flying in the sky on a painting. Does that make it okay by today's standards? No. Does that make it okay by my standards? No. I find it weird and disturbing and disgusting, as I'm sure a lot of you do, hopefully. However, if we are going to call him a child molester because he has photos of that, we need to call the entire Victorian era child molesters because they did the same thing. Also, he asked for Alice's hand in marriage, which was a little weird because he babysitted her and her kid sisters and older sisters and wrote this story for her to entertain her. So that adds to it to make it a little bit more creepy, and I understand that. However, young girls were married off all the time in the Victorian era, and she was the only young girl that he really knew. She was the only woman that he really had any interest in at the time. I think she was a young woman at the time, about 14 to 16. Her parents, thankfully, gave her the choice because they were, I guess, progressive for Victorian era, and she said no. And I don't think that I blame her. I'm sure she had a lot of love for him because he wrote a book for her, and he gave all his proceeds to her when she died. She got everything from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland when he died, which is really cool and really sweet. But I don't think it was ever romantic between them at all. I don't think there was anything inappropriate besides the photos, but that's inappropriate for everybody in the Victorian era, like I said. I don't think there was any grossness going on between him and Alice. I think it was just Victorian culture. That is my opinion, and that is the completion of The Dark Side of Wonderland. The next thing we are going to talk about is the origin of nonsense writing, which is this book. Nonsense writing is just stream of consciousness, stream of thought writing. I'll get into that in a second. Just whatever pops into your head. It doesn't have a plot. It doesn't need a plot. Just whatever you think would entertain someone, whatever you think would be fun. And this is different from pantsing. As a writer, you know what pantsing is. Pantsing versus plotting. Plotting is you write down key plot points before you write a story. Pantsing is just coming up with it by the seat of your pants. But the two of them are different. Nonsense writing is meant to be nonsensical. It's meant to be funny, silly, not make any sense at all, just complete and utter ridiculousness, which is awesome. My YouTube series, live action series of stuffed animals called Dreamy Adventures of Theodore is nonsense writing. The only plot point that I made for it was that it was all a dream. That was it. And I wanted it to be canon because it's a prequel to my novel. I wanted it to be canon to that. But those are the only plot points I did. Everything else that happened in it, complete nonsense, complete weirdness, complete oddities, because it's a dream. I wanted it to be weird. So it was nonsense writing, inspired by Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The entire novel of Dream, my novel, was inspired by Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So, humor. Humor in this book is actually pretty hilarious. Even though it's like over 100 years old. It came out in the late 1800s, I think. That's way over 100 years old. But it's hilarious, actually. Even as an adult, as a 35-year-old man, I laughed. And I will have a link to my readings, because I did readings for this whole book on YouTube. I laughed. The whole book, I laughed. It was really funny. It was even funnier than the movies. The Tim Burton movie was not that funny. It was just family-friendly. The cartoon was a little more funny than the Tim Burton one. This book is hilarious. Hilarious. And if you have not read it as an adult, I definitely suggest it. It's also educational because it takes place way back when, and I didn't know a few things. Like I forgot what it was called, but it's some kind of sugary concoction they make. I forgot what it's called. I'll put it down here. But I had to look that up because I didn't know what the hell it was. It talks about Victorian culture. A lot of things I didn't know, even though I'm interested in Victorian culture. Very educational, very cool. If you haven't read it as an adult, if you have kids, let them read this or read it to them, because it's educational and it's hilarious. And it's also a classic. You can't go wrong with classics. The next, we're talking about Alice herself. This is Alice. She's upside down right now. Talking about Alice from the book. She is very different from the movie and from the Tim Burton movie that I've seen. I love Alice, as you can tell. I have a doll of her. I love this book. I love the movies. Alice has since become a pop culture staple in a lot of ways. You can't go to a smoke shop without seeing something about Alice being a stoner, or her with the caterpillar smoking weed. But she's everywhere. The Disney version, the original version, people's own version. I have made my own version a lot of times, including a modern American black one. So I like her the way I like her. I'll show you here somewhere. But I also have an Alice character theory, where a seemingly blank main character is used to showcase a magical world full of much more interesting characters. An example of that would be, if you've ever seen Orange is the New Black, Piper is an Alice character. She's kind of bland, meant to basically see yourself in, kind of like Alice, so you can go on this adventure with her. It starts off mainly about her going into this different world, a different culture, and then she sees all kinds of crazy stories and crazy things happening around her, and you get to experience them for the first time with her, which is really cool. That is an Alice character for me. Speaking of Alice herself, in the books, as I said, she's way different than she is in the movies. She's actually kind of mean in the books. She talks about how stupid her friends are, and you know how in the movies that the characters are dicks to her? She's a dick right back. Sometimes she's a dick first. She's a little bitch in the books, and I love it. She's hilarious. All the characters are hilarious, but especially her. She's a sassy little thing, and she does not put up with anything. Also, unlike the adaptations, which I don't really understand this, Alice originally had a goal in the original book. She, in the beginning, behind the door does not talk, where she gets the key to unlock it and go. There is a garden, a wonderful, beautiful garden that she wants to get to. That is her driving force throughout the book. In the animated version, that is not a goal. She does not have a goal. She kind of just goes through doing whatever. In the Tim Burton one, she has a goal eventually, which is just to stop the Queen of Hearts, but that wasn't her goal. She just kind of wanted to wake up because she thought it was a dream, which is kind of lame. I prefer the book. Because she is a kid, it's going to be a simple goal. She wants to go hang out in the garden, see how pretty it is. I believe it's a flower garden. Spoiler alert, turns out it is the Queen's garden. But that's neither here nor there. Our girl Alice has a goal. She's all in all, this is a great children's book that adults can still find humor and happiness in, even to this day in 2025. I can definitely say it is probably my favorite children's books, one of my favorite children's books I have ever read in my life, from childhood to now. And as an adult, I have found a newfound appreciation for all things Alice. As you can tell, I'm dressed like the Mad Hatter today, or at least a little bit, with my little leather top hat. But yeah, if you haven't read this as an adult, you have kids that you want to read it, let them read it. Read it yourself. It's hilarious. There's nothing inappropriate about it. There's nothing really drug related except for the caterpillar with the hookah. But again, just tell your kids the hookah was for medicinal purposes in the Victorian era. It's fine. There's nothing inappropriate about it. The author has that reputation, like I mentioned, but your kids don't have to know that. And also the Victorian era was weird in general. But yeah, all in all, I definitely recommend it. This is a book review, so it gets 10 mushrooms out of 10. 10 magical mushrooms. Let's all grow tall with Alice. But that's it. That's all I have for you guys today. Be sure to check out my shop, prismaticdreams.com. I also have a Patreon if you want to support me. Link in description. We are doing a Manic Mondays episode this Monday. I'm not sure if this video, this Alice book review, will premiere before that. But if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's a big update for this channel. Changes going forward. Things that should have been in place a long time ago, because I think this is my 5th year on YouTube, maybe 6th, maybe 7th actually. But all in all, I am proud of where I am. I'm proud of where I'm going. Hopefully you guys will join me. Hopefully we can get other people to join us. And I love you guys, and stay weird like Alice. Alice is very weird and she's very cool. But whether you're a stoner or you're just a big kid at heart, we all love Alice. Alice is a good character. She's kind of a bitch, but she's hilarious, and we should all look up to her because she's funny, and she fights against very evil government officials, like the Queen of Hearts, like He Who Shall Not Be Named. So we should follow in Alice's footsteps and call out his bullshit like she does the Queen. That is all I have time for today, you guys. I love you, and I will see you next time.